Hello and welcome to a production of my Davinci Cam Power Hammer project. But first I'd like to thank Rick Grabjohn of Booyah Forge and Roy Adams of Christ Center Ironworks for the ideas and inspiration for this project. Thanks for joining me. Alright, let's begin by taking a look at the frame of the hammer. As you can see, I chose to use pressure treated lumber, which the reason why is because it's mainly readily available at your local lumberyard or big box do-it-yourself store, and mainly because it's a nice durable wood that would hold up to years of abuse. It is bolted together using through bolts and lag screws. For the main reason why I wanted to use wood was because I have neighbors that are pretty close by, and I figured it would be a lot quieter using lumber versus using steel, and the fact that I'm still working on my fabrication setup and my welding skills. Okay, for the motor, I went with a 1 horsepower single phase that's wired for 110 volts, and it turns at 1750 RPMs. Now to slow the hammer down, I went with a 14:1 pulley reduction, which, if my calculations are correct, brings the speed down to around 120 hits per minute, which I find is a good working speed. The 14-inch V-pulley rests on a 5/8 auburn assembly, which I got online. The power is now transferred over via the shaft to the Davinci cam. I welded a piece of 1/8-inch mild steel onto the auburn nut, which I then threaded on the shaft and screwed to the cam with full wood screws. It worked out pretty well. I used a section of train rail for my anvil, and as you can see, it has a really nice profile for drawing out the stock. I used a 10-pound sledgehammer, which definitely is not adequate, so to increase the hitting force of the machine, I went with a tension spring, which unfortunately I could not find out the actual poundage on the spring, but by lifting the head of the hammer up, it feels like I'm lifting about a 40 to 50 pound weight. In the future, I'm probably going to do a small video as far as what the actual hitting power of this is, because I think some of you guys out there are probably going to be curious as far as what the actual poundage is. And I'm hoping to actually increase the hitting power of the hammer. I'd like to get up to about a 65 to 70 pound striking force. To engage the hammer, I simply step on this foot treadle, thereby pinching the belt and turning the wheel. I even added this turnbuckle here, so if I have to adjust for any tension in the belt due to wear and breaking in, I can just simply turn this back and forth. Works out quite well. Now, one important thing that I'd like to point out is that I had poured a concrete slab and bolted the hammer down to the concrete, which really makes the hammer work so much better. When I first fired it up, I had it on the plywood floor of my shop, and this thing basically bounced all over the place. I had tools and stuff almost raining down on my head, but once I bolted it down to this concrete slab, it works so much better. So I highly recommend bolting your machine down. So if you're wondering how you design a Davinci cam, I recommend checking out one of Mr. Grabjohn's videos. He goes over in quite detail about how one is constructed. Now, the reason why I chose this style of machine over others was I mainly wanted something that would be relatively simple to build. You know, it wasn't going to cost a lot of money. I think all told I probably spent $450, $500 in materials, with the exception of the rail components, which I salvaged. But I was basically looking for a hammer that I could use to draw out stock and save my arm and shoulder from doing more hand detail work with a hand hammer and an anvil. And you know, if any of you guys are thinking about building something like this, I highly recommend it. You know, if you want a simple machine, you know, if you're into making knives or swords or anything like that, and you need to draw out some material, this machine's really going to get the job done for you. And now it's time to have some fun. Let's fire this baby up and do some hammering. this is what it can do. This was an old piece of rusted 3/4 inch round stock that I used as my first test piece, and it does a pretty darn good job. You can easily taper with it as well. Alright, thanks guys. Hopefully this video is a help as far as if you guys plan on building a power hammer yourselves. Stay tuned because I may post some future videos of me actually making stuff on the hammer. And anyway, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Thanks.